Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Whitehall Town Hall Safer Initiative. And thank you to New Life Church and Pastor Claude Davis and your congregation for opening up the church to us. We really appreciate your support of the city. Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Kim Maggard, and I've been Whitehall's mayor since 2012. And on stage beside me are Mike Crispen, our chief of police, and Deputy Chief Stan Kelso, and Tracy Sharpless. And I do know their names. I'm just a little nervous. In fact, I was just talking to someone about names and how when I get nervous, it's sometimes I forget. So at least there's another person out there who I can commiserate with. But before we dive into the Chief's presentation and the Q&A session, because I know you guys also have lots of questions, I'm curious to know how many of you have attended a Safer Whitehall Town Hall before. And if you have, wow, okay, stand up. I want to see all of you, okay? Yeah, come on. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, and now I'm curious to know, how many of you have any questions regarding issue 10 about the Safer Whitehall levy? And if you do, stand up so I can, nobody has any? Come on, somebody okay, that's great. Awesome. And so we're glad that you're here too in order to get your questions answered. And as the May 3rd election approaches, the city is addressing a number of questions about issue 10. And so we hope that tonight we can really get a good conversation started surrounding the levy. But before we get into issue 10, I think it's important to take a step back and discuss what our Division of Police have accomplished in the recent years as part of their strategic plan implementation, as well as the challenges that they're currently facing. And from the rise in domestic violence to the higher instances of carjackings to re-engaging our youth, the task ahead of our police department is never easy. And so thank you to our men and women in blue for all you do. We appreciate every one of you. And so with that, I'm going to take myself off, and I'm going to have Chief Crispen come up here to share with you about the agenda for the town hall. And come on up, Chief.
All right, well, thanks everybody for coming out. Mayor, thank you very much. Council, everybody that's always supportive of us, especially the community. We've always been here since 2016, and the amount of support we get from the community is just always overwhelms me, always had. I will talk here in a little bit, not right now, about some statistics, one of which I literally cannot take credit for. Neither can any of our folks. We can take some credit for it, but really, my mind, with over 30 years experience in this, says there's no way this happened unless the community itself was significantly engaged. And hopefully I remember what that is when I get to it, but I remember what it is. I remember to say it. But so a couple things we want to do. Now I want to be, first, I know we're here, a lot of folks want to know a little bit about issue 10. We certainly will answer any of those questions, cover a few things on that as well. That is typically not our reasons for having town hall meetings. One is to give you an update where we are on our strategic plan. We'll do that. The two gentlemen beside me here, the deputy chiefs, will cover their areas of expertise in that strategic plan. And then I will then go over a little bit of the issue 10 stuff that I sort of like the frequently asked questions and the stuff that we have going on. And then we'll get into a little bit of what's going on, let the mayor mention some of the crime rate and stuff. So with all that, what's really the most important to us, always has been for these things, is this is our once every 6 months, and I think this very well might be our first since COVID and all that. We're standing in front of each other. Not that the virtual ones aren't important, weren't fine, we got some information, but when I can look right at you and talk to you, it just feels better. So I'm glad we are doing that. That's really makes it better. So, but what we want to get from you is what else besides what we're talking about? What are we missing, right? What are some of the areas that we need to work on and what are the things that you need to know, or we can answer questions for you, as well as talk about some things we're doing with Polko and some other stuff we'll get to later. So before I drag this on like I tend to do, I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Chief Kelso, and he is going to talk to you about, we'll hold the questions to the end, but if you really have something, we'll answer it.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Pastor Davis. We really appreciate the use of this facility. I'm Deputy Chief Dan Kelso. I'm in charge of operations, the patrol division, essentially. Sorry if I sound a little nasally. I got some allergies or cold or something going on there. I think allergies. So I just wanted to hit a couple highlights from our strategic plan on the basis of the Patrol Bureau. So if you look around Whitehall right now, first thing I want to hit is our theft signs. I don't know if anyone's seen it, but about 10 egresses, ingresses in this city. When you drive around, when you come into this city, you will see big signs now saying that if you steal in Whitehall, essentially you're going to jail. That's about 10 points around, and then we have a secondary sign on the windows of just about every business we could get involved. So if you drive around town and country, you're going to see a whole lot of signs. Like some of the businesses have 3, 4, 5 of them in every single window that they got up there. So same with Great Eastern. So this is something we follow through on, and we have been hard on theft since Chief Crispen took over. We give very, very few breaks for any type of theft offense, but we want to get that word out there anymore. We want people to know the minute you come into this city, this is not the break zone for theft. So that's one of the things. We've been trying to get that campaign underway. COVID kind of set it back, but we got it in full swing right now. Next, I want to talk about our crime blitzes and our directed traffic patrols. Our crime blitzes, these are large operations where we target specific things with a whole lot of police officers. So patrol officers, undercover officers, detectives, we get them all together for a day and we hit a specific thing like drug dealers, thefts, car break-ins, package delivery thieves. We find a niche in the city that we think there's a problem at, and we focus everybody that's not just working that day, we bring in extras. If you haven't seen it, Channel 6, sometimes, just about all these, we let the media ride along on, then we make them wait a day until they can report on it. But Channel 6 rode along with us on the last one. So if you get a chance, you can go watch that on our Twitter or Facebook. But since January of 2021, we've conducted 16 of these crime blitzes, and we've arrested 166 people. Charges for drugs, drug dealing, theft, stolen cars, multiple gun charges, felony warrants, including warrants for violent crimes and sexual offenses. Recovered all kinds of guns and drugs. It's just too many to even list here. That sixth story, this was like 2 weeks ago now, but just that one night in about a 5-hour, 6-hour range, we made 18 arrests for crack cocaine, fentanyl, powder cocaine. We recovered 4 guns off the street, 2 stolen cars, and 4 wanted felons that night. So that's just kind of an example of one night, and we try to do these every few weeks, and kind of hit the different zones like I was talking about. The other thing we do is directed patrols for crime. For traffic. We get a lot of citizen complaints for speeding up and down roads, and we hear you. And we are doing our best. We cannot be everywhere at one time, but we do our best to listen to the citizens, put out special patrols for their needs, and also what we do is we focus on where our crash is occurring. Since I can't put someone out on every single street, at least we can focus on where's our worst zones for crashes. So we do at least 3 a month based on crash stats, the future prediction of crime stats through our crime analyst unit, and traffic stats, and also what happened last year at this time. So kind of people are reciprocal in where they drive each part of the year. So that type of a thing. So we do 3 per month. Those have resulted, and what we're focused on is aggressive driving behavior. Those behaviors that cause crashes and that tick off our residents, we understand that. Speeding, stop signs, red lights, OVIs, all those things that are causing danger to our community. We also then do secondary blitzes specific to what our citizens call them. They call me up on the road and say, "Hey, listen, I've seen this guy. He comes up and down the road every day at 4 o'clock. He's going 50 miles an hour in this 25 mile per hour zone. He's almost hit kids. Those type of things. We will put out patrols for those type of things. I'm available. Give me a call, and we do that every single month." But just through those type of patrols, we've actually written 262 citations for those aggressive driving behaviors, and 49 drunk driving arrests off of it. I'm not gonna lie, it's we need more officers on the street for these proactive missions, because when we do these things, I'm taking officers off the street or I'm taking them from somewhere else. And second shift's and most of this stuff's occurring on second shift. Those 3 to 11 hours, people are off work or kids are getting home from school, all those kind of things. And second shift nowadays, most of our runs that we take are 2-officer runs, or sometimes some of them are even 3-officer runs. You get a crash, I have to shut down an intersection. I'm going to use 3 or 4 officers. I'm going to sometimes take the entire shift just to handle one crash that's going on. So, we do need more officers on the streets for these type of things. Last, I want to talk about a little bit about recruiting and training. So, we've been trying to increase our police force, and we started recruiting several years ago. We did a lateral entry program, which was real successful. In fact, it's so successful that almost every community in Columbus is now copying us, including the Columbus Police Department, who have never accepted a lateral entry in the history of their police department, are now opening up lateral entry. But we were one of the first ones in the community, I think, aside from Reynoldsburg, who did it many years ago, but weren't real aggressive on it. However, we started doing it. It saves us a tremendous amount of money for training and academy. We're getting experienced officers. We're getting them from other communities outside of Franklin County, trying to bring them in. We've hired 8 officers that way, and it's a rather quick process, so it's very helpful. We've also employed diversity recruitment strategies, and the lateral entries really helped with our diversity too. Training in 2021, we logged 8,000 hours of training for our officers. All kinds of training, not just canine and SWAT, but use of force training, de-escalation, crisis intervention, a whole range of investigative schools that we send our officers to, patrol schools, supervisory schools. This year so far, just in our first quarter, our officers have logged 2,000 hours of training. So we're right on target to meet another 8,000 hours a year. We faced some challenges. We were up to 53 officers at one point. We're at 54. We're trying to get back up to at least 54. But with all these officers, we have 2 workstations for patrol officers, a limited amount of lockers. So kind of the building's kind of closing in on us a little bit of there. Including our range. We have to do most of our training off-site. Well, our range was built when the building was built in 1972. I know everyone's seen Adam 12, but we don't train like that anymore. We don't sit there with a revolver, shoot 6 shots, and walk off the line. Nowadays, it's dynamic training. We have to shoot in all different types of directions, and we're just not equipped for that anymore. So that's another obstacle that we've encountered with all these new officers. But we do our best to overcome these, provide the best service we can for the community, and we're going to continue to do that. So with that, I'm going to introduce Deputy Chief Sharpless. He's over the other division, which is the Administrative and Detective Bureau, the investigative operations.
All right, thank you, Dan. Again, I'm Tracy Sharpless. I'm the other deputy chief, and tonight I'm going to talk to you about 3 things. I want to talk to you about the dispatch center, I want to talk to you about the property room, and I want to talk to you about our clerical section. A lot of times the exciting stuff is narcotics and the Detective Bureau. If you want to see what they're doing, all you have to do is log into Facebook or Twitter. You'll see a lot of good information on there about what they're doing, what kind of arrests they've been making lately. The dispatch center, this is kind of near and dear to my heart. I think this is a very important topic at this time of the year, and I'm going to spend a little time on it. So our dispatch center, we take about 60,000 calls a year, both emergency and 911 calls. Our dispatchers, they do a great job of, maintaining their composure, when the other person that's calling in is really in a crisis more often than not. Those are difficult calls to take, and they do a great job. I want a shout out to one of our dispatcher, Audrey Briggs. She was nominated as Dispatcher of the Year for the state of Ohio. So that's fantastic. Thank you. Speaking of staffing, when we are fully staffed, we have 12 dispatchers. We are a little short-staffed right now. As with the job market right now is very tight. It's certainly that way here in Franklin County. It's that way for police officers, and it's that way for dispatchers. It's very difficult to attract candidates. We are competing against all the other cities on a number of things. We're looking at salary, benefits, facilities, culture of the organization, things like that. Fortunately, we're able to check off a lot of those boxes, but I'm going to be honest with you, facilities, obviously we can't do that. Our building was built in 1972, and we can't change that. In 1972, our radio room was made for one dispatcher who sat in a room, who answered a telephone. They didn't have computers back then. They answered the phone, they wrote the calls down on a piece of paper, and they dispatched it on a radio. Here we are 50 years later. We're in that same dispatch room, that same dispatch center. Now we have 3 dispatchers. Every one of the dispatchers have multiple computers, 6 to 8 monitors that they're responsible for. The job has changed. On top of that, they're sitting on top of one another. The room was not made for 3 people. So when they're taking 911 calls, and these are emergency calls, they're all trying to talk over each other. That's a dangerous situation. You miss a lot of good information, and it's not ideal, and we hope to be able to remedy that. Next thing I want to talk about is equipment, the equipment in the radio room. One of probably the most important pieces of equipment in any radio room is the radio console. That's how we communicate with the officers. That's how we call the fire department. That's how we transfer your call to the MEC center to get you the emergency service that you need. Our radio consoles, I'm not exactly sure when we purchased them, but I have a dispatcher that started in 1993, the same year as I did, and she insists that same radio console was there when she started. Now the bottom line is these radio consoles, they don't make them anymore. We can't repair them. There's not pieces to repair them. We patch them up as best we can. They certainly don't work the way that they were intended to work 30 years ago. I equate a radio console to like a major appliance that you might have in your house. Does anybody have a major appliance or refrigerator that's 30 years old that still works as good as it did 30 years ago? I'm guessing probably not. So when I look at our consoles, we have a refrigerator that when we open the door, the light doesn't come on. The ice machine no longer works, but it still keeps food relatively cold, so we're still using it. They're very expensive. So that's why it hasn't been replaced to this point. There's certainly newer technology out there, is my point, that would certainly serve the public better to ensure that when you call in, number one, I want to make sure that you're able to get through to a dispatcher, and we're able to dispatch first responders to you when you need them. And, it's sad to say I can't absolutely guarantee that right now. If you call in, if it doesn't come through, that call will be transferred to somebody else. But what that equates to is a delay in service. And, when you're dealing with an emergency, 30 seconds can make the difference between life and death. So I just as soon have newer equipment and be able to dispatch our first responders immediately for you. All right, I think I beat you down enough on the dispatch center. But I'm going to move on to the property room. I like to say it's better, but it's a little bleak itself. Our property room, again, same property room from 1972. Hasn't gotten any better. Every year we get more property. We got to do something with it. We have 27,000 pieces of property currently in our room. It is stacked floor to ceiling. When we ran out of room in the property room, we stored it in our underground garage. Unfortunately, just like a lot of communities in central Ohio, it's prone to flooding. We have lost property that has been stored in our underground garage due to the flooding. There's just nothing else we can do with it. I guess the last thing we've done for the property is when we ran out of room in our property room, we ran out of room in our basement, we actually buy steel cargo containers. When you look on TV and you see those giant cargo ships coming in from off the coast of California, those giant steel containers, we have those Connex boxes. We lease those, the city does. They're sitting behind the police department, and that is where we store excess property, or evidence in some cases. Uh, I guess that's it for the property room. I'm going to move on to the clerical section. It's a little rosier. I don't want to beat you down anymore. Some of the things we've done is our primary goal is to keep officers on the street. We need officers that are on the street, so when the calls come in, we can quickly dispatch them. They need to be available so we can get them to you to answer your emergency. We've introduced e-citations or electronic citations. That's a time saver. It's a time saver for the officers. They can clear a traffic stop. They're not spending 15, 20 minutes on a traffic stop. Maybe they can get out of there in 5 minutes. They're back on the street, able to respond to a call. It also helps our clerical department a lot. That stuff is electronically submitted to their computers. They don't have to re-enter all that stuff. So it's a time saver for them as well. Knowing that we're trying to get officers free and we're trying to keep them on the street, we've talked to our clerks. And they're on board. We have conducted training so that they now process a lot of things that we used to have to call officers in off the street to handle. So they're doing a great job with that. Somebody wants to turn themselves in on a warrant, they can now process that paperwork, give the person a new court date, the officer can stay on the street. Somebody wants to come in and post bond, same thing. The officers stay on the street where we need them, where you want them, and the clerks handle a lot of that paperwork. Again, I guess the only constraint on the clerical section at this point that I've noticed is again square footage. There's nothing we can do to increase the square footage of our current building. So the clerical, all the records, any paper records that we have, those are stored in the basement. That again, sometimes floods. In fact, 2 or 3 years ago, we had a substantial flood. I'm sure many of the residents here that were impacted remember this. We were as well. We spent $30,000 to have important records freeze-dried and restored that we are required by law to maintain. So that was a significant expense. Granted, we know that our building could have water. We've taken a number of steps. Don't think that we're ignoring the issue. Just like everybody else out there, you're doing what you can to try to remedy this. We've purchased sandbags. We have our sergeants. First thing they do when the water starts to rise, they grab their sandbags. They start barricading the doors. We open the door to our basement so it doesn't cave in on us. We've had to replace that door before. The records and property that's in the basement, we've taken extraordinary steps to have them raised. Our service department has made us all kinds of shelving units and stuff so that we can try to keep that stuff off the ground so they're not going to be impacted by the flooding. But the bottom line is a lot of our problems today, are the result of the fact that we are stuck in a building that was built in 1972. It was made for a police department that operated in 1972 with half the force that we currently have. So I'm asking you to take a strong look at the issue. I've explained to some of the challenges that we're facing. If they're important to you, then I hope that you'll come out and vote appropriately. Thank you for your time.
In my recent State of the City address, I shared that one of Whitehall's historical challenges has been crime, and that I wouldn't shy away from that fact. I won't shy away from that fact because this challenge is being met head-on by our police division. Since I started as your mayor in 2012, we have seen the Division of Police budget increase by 46%. This, coupled with the hiring of Chief of Police Mike Crispen and the implementation of a Safer Whitehall initiative, we have seen results in improved crime stats and improved perceptions of safety throughout our community.
Well, after the first 3-year strategic plan, we had a reduction in violent crime by 27%. At one point, it was down to almost 40%. And we had 20-year record lows with robberies and burglaries. Well, everything sort of changed in 2020. You had the pandemic, right? And the pandemic started having issues in the families. Domestic violence really went up pretty high and became an issue with us. We had to partner with the city attorney's office to sort of resolve. We also saw throughout the summer, we began to see property crimes increase and violent crime started increasing. We just saw a trend that hasn't really turned back since then. And much of what we achieved over that first 3 years has been replaced with what we've seen since 2020. So moving forward, one of the things we're going to have to do to build up safety in Whitehall and to get back to those successes we were at, we're going to need resources, more officers. We've always needed those officers to begin with to deal with our humanitarian issues, but we really need them now to deal with these crime rates and then back to deal with those humanitarian issues. So we need space. We have one of the oldest buildings, if not the oldest building in Franklin County for policing. And we certainly need some help in space and resources and technology to allow us to be efficient in that process. For example, if you look at the East Side agencies, we're 50% or more in most areas of enforcement efforts and responsibility related to crime with less officers. And this is why I'm grateful to City Council and Mayor Maggard for placing the Safer Whitehall Levy, Issue 10, on the primary election ballot.
Issue 10 is a 2.822 mill property tax levy, and if approved by the Whitehall voters, 100% of this revenue would support police operations and safety capital improvements. This would include the hiring of 6 new police officers, as well as the renovation and expansion of the police station.
So as you learn more about Issue 10, and if you have questions, I would invite you to join me at the next Safer Town Hall meeting so we can talk about those things.
Please learn more about the Safer Whitehall levy before you vote in the primary election this year.
I'm going to say a word called it's perspective, and not necessarily perspective for you, but perspective from my perspective. As I listen to these gentlemen talk, I've listened to the mayor when they come up here, I've talked to a lot of you at times, and you know, I started in 2016, and I was hired to do something. And during the interview, and then of course when the mayor hired me, we had a conversation about what do we have to do to improve the crime rate in the community, and what do we need to do? Please take the time to review that. And that was one of the things I was hired. That was my duty, my job to do. And about 2017, some of you were on council, so you remember, where I came in and sort of presented, this is my findings about what we need. A lot of what you just heard was not just this year, that was in 2017. There's nothing that I can recall, so I'm running real fast in my head to make sure I'm right, but I can't think of anything we just talked about that we haven't been talking about since 2017. It became, I thought that was me. My wife doesn't know I'm here. That's a joke. That's recorded. She's going to catch that. All right. So, but a lot of that stuff was on there. So then once we realized what we needed to do, how we had to deal with the crime, first and foremost, the number one priority that we had as a department was crime rate. We'll work with what we had. We knew we had these things that were necessary. We talked about those things. We looked for budgeting, and the mayor began, the council began to provide us with funding. And I think if I look back, it was probably going up around $500,000-600,000 each year just to get us to where we needed to go. And sort of grants and things of that nature. We were asking for grants all the time. And so that's what got us sort of where we needed to be in 2020. We had a budget, and we had planned on for a couple years to build even the building. All that stuff was supposed to be taken care of. And then 2020 hit. But that didn't end it. We still kept pushing forward. And then we still, you know, the other things with finances, the thing kicked in. You guys see what's happened with the inflation and everything. It just, our architects just finally looked at us and we can piecemeal it for you. So we knew we were sort of in trouble, and that's what landed us kind of where we are today. But I wanted to sort of go back in time and just hit that. I did a little bit, but the return on investment for what we have done, what do you get for your money? I'm a huge believer in that, whether it's our narcotics division, school resource officers, whatever we're doing. What's your return on investment? For every dollar, there ought to be some type of return on investment for crime reduction, period. We don't just need new office space because guys are just tired of being jammed in together. We need office space for efficiency, and efficiency equals time, and time equals people on the street, and there's people on the street, crime reduction. Everything relates to crime reduction. And that's how we came up with that number of 60. I think it was the mayor, but somebody asked me in that meeting, what about 61 or 62? You sure it's 60? I don't want more than 60. We need 60. Right now it's 60. That's where we're at. We need 60. Much more than that, we can do what we need to do with 60. Now, the way the world's going sometimes, maybe in a few years we might need 65, I don't know, but in technology and reporting responsibilities, but currently we're at 60 is our need. So this is what we did up to that point. We saw a reduction. You saw 27%. That's where we hit that 20 years lows with our robberies and burglaries. And I promised a second ago that I would mention something. The number is showing 46 on the screen here. It is now at 54%. I've never seen that, right? Burglary reductions are 54%. That's raw numbers cut in more than half. It's amazing. And I wish that we knew. We're doing the same thing with all the other stuff. So this has to be things that you're doing when you come to these town halls and we say, here's some of the things that you can do to make Whitehall safer. Do some things in your own community. Lock stuff up. Lock your house up, right? Watch each other's homes and call something if you see something. That's about the only thing. And then, of course, all of our businesses and stuff taking a stance of supporting us if someone shoplifts. And I know that sounds odd to you to say that for them to support us. It really is harmful to a business. Some of you are probably business owners, so you know what I'm talking about. It's harmful to a business when someone shoplifts. It's harmful twice. It's harmful that you lost stuff, but if we catch them, it's harmful again when we subpoena you to come to court, right? Now you got to send somebody to court, and you got to pay someone else to run the business, or you got to shut the business down. You got insurance that covers that stuff. The path of least resistance tends to land. You know, just give me my stuff back, or turn in insurance, give me a report, right? And that really is probably a better business model as far as money's concerned. It's just not a good business model for crime reduction, right? And so we've partnered with a lot of our communities, and they've taken a pretty solid stance. And I really do believe a lot of these numbers that you see on the screen here is a direct result of the collaborations that we have, not just what police do, but what you folks do as well. So some of these are just more repeats of what I had. I just want you to sort of see the trend from 2016 and 2021. The darker one on the left is 2016, and the one on the right is 2021. You see that it's going down. Now, there's a couple there, and I want to go back. If you remember 17, 18, if you were there, we had our very, very first town hall. I don't have this up on there, but you might remember this curve thing I said, right? I said, please just let me necessarily make your crime rate go up shortly for a period. That was theft stuff, right? If you let us drive the theft arrests up, because I remember telling you that if you want me to take your crime rate to 0, I can do that in 1 year. We just stop arresting people, because that's where those crime rates come from, right? Nobody wants that, so except the criminals. So we to get it there, we had to do a lot of focus on those little things, those quality of life crimes. And I say this often. I know society generally is sort of wrestling with some of these shoplifting or theft things versus the carjackings versus murders, right? And it seems like we got our focus on the murders and the serious robberies and stuff, but if someone breaks in your house, the first thing they've probably done is trespass, right? And everything just goes up like that. There's little things that get to the big things. And if you take care of the little things, which is what we've always had a belief in, the big things just don't happen. I think you probably do that in your own household. So it's not something, I didn't just come up with something phenomenal, right? So that's the reason that we see some of those things. Now, this is starting to change. We just finished our crime rate review for this last quarter, which is starting to look a lot better. Right there is the trend that you're seeing since 16. The spikes you're seeing is thefts, right? Theft arrests. So you can see when we're working hard and doing some of the things the deputy chief just mentioned about the blitzes, you can see what happens to that crime. There's a correlation there. It starts to drive some of it down. And then they readjust and they try a different way, right? Or they swear they're not in Whitehall, right? And then they say, yes, you are. The sign is not the line, right? So those things kind of happen sometimes. We are starting to see trends. We've got technology, better technology we're working with currently, partnerships that we're having with the other agencies, and we're still pushing the blitzes, right? We're really working the guys hard to get out there and deal with these theft blitzes and narcotic stuff. And that's starting to have a push, right? We pulled back a little bit, just like everybody else did in 2020, right? That everybody was worried about catching COVID, and we were doing the basic necessity to keep everybody safe, including our own officers. And then everybody just started inching back, right? For some of the criminals, generally, unless they were home during that short period, for them, they weren't as much worried about COVID as they were still on the TV. These guys still were, and so were we. But it's sort of in Whitehall, they're getting the message, game's back on again, right? And but we really have guys working a lot of time. And I mentioned that, and I'll go to this last thing here, and I mentioned that because of this. 2 days ago, I was at a meeting with some chiefs, and it was a meeting with a bunch of church leaders, synagogue leaders, and they were really concerned, as you guys might remember, some things that's happened recently in the news. And they're really scared, and they want some more help. And we were meeting with them to see what we could do collaboratively to help get them some help with some extra duty security with police officers. They didn't want to use private security anymore. So we had to let them know what's going on. For us, we're staffing the streets, barely. Everybody from Columbus to all of us, right? And we're having to cover overtime for some of the increases in, these blitzes are not covered by regular patrol, they're covered by other people. We bring other off-duty folks as much as possible to work overtime, and then we have our own special duties. Some of you may have even used them. And so it's almost a serious problem for the profession in Franklin County to get enough officers willing to work special duty. Last year I worked real hard with the chief of police out of OSU and Columbus to try to get officers for them from us and everywhere around to cover the football games, the high state football games. They were 40 low. They ended up working the games with about 30 or 40 officers less than normal. So we sense what they're going through, and we understand it, shuffling this around and people around. We are a little bit better off than they are in Whitehall. And a lot of that has to do with your support, has to do with the mayor and council support that help us keep to that number 53 or 54 we were at, and getting 6 additional officers that we were able to end up doing, all right? So I want to show you this here. These are some of the things that these guys have been doing that really didn't get a chance for them to say. Additional community engagement stuff, school resource officers, diversion program. You're seeing a 76% success rate in our diversion program. And what is a diversion program? We're not looking to arrest everybody and put everybody in jail. We triage each situation. If you're stealing bread because you're hungry, the old cliche, no one's going to jail for stealing bread because they're hungry. But you're probably going to go to jail if you took someone's TV out of their house, right? Because you don't need that. That's not something you need to survive on. We've had officers pay for people's medicine because they've shoplifted from Walmart and they just wouldn't pay for them because they really needed it, right? Not prescription, but like Motrin and that kind of stuff. So they triage everything. But the ones who need to go to jail, go to jail. But sometimes there's a middle ground, right? What you did deserves going to jail, but you're a first-time offender. This is kind of low. We've probably done it with our own kids. How about you start with going to whose house you broke the window or whose stuff you took, and start with apologizing. How about you write a letter, and how about you mow their lawn or do something for them to make up the difference? That's what the diversion program allows us to do, and our school resource officers run that. If they do it successfully, then they don't get a charge and the court drops their stuff. That's a 76% success rate we've had. You would think it should be 100. That's a pretty good break, I think, but it's not 100. So, and then of course we look at stuff like Pastor Toby and Pastor Claude. I think there's some others. I'm probably missing some of your folks that are doing it with LifeWise that's out back here, right? I can't help but put a shout out to that. How much you say? How many students?
Over 240 now.
It was like 15 or 16 the first time you mentioned it. 15, a great program that's helping character building and giving hope and giving faith to the youth. So there's so much stuff going on in the community, moving pieces to make this better. So first off, thanks to each of you guys for doing that. And I'm sure I missed a whole bunch of people, probably totally responsible for that, so I apologize. But here. But I think it's a reiteration of what I said earlier. Six additional officers we've added since 2016. I don't think there's been a year I know there hasn't been a year that I've been there that we haven't, even during 2020, actively been hiring and hiring and hiring and hiring. We don't lower our standards. We're not going to lower our standards. So it takes quite a few candidates for us to finally swear someone in, and then someone turns around and retires on us. So we're talking about this thing like the military did when I was in. They wouldn't let you leave and held you another couple years. I don't know if we can do that or not. Stop-loss program, they called it. But we still needed 6 additional officers. That would get us to 60, and that's what we were getting at before. We've had a significant amount of planning to get to this point. We had a plan to get there before COVID, but you know how things have happened, right? So real quick, I'm going to hit these real fast because I know we're getting time. I don't want to hold you up real long. We want to be respectful of your time, but the future operational needs of the facility have been covered, so I'm just going to hit a couple of additional things for you in some photos, I think. Yeah. So real quick, this was the range. I just want to reiterate that. That's a range. Typically, if you've been on a range, I don't know how many of you have shot guns before, but you usually don't have stuff piled up on the sides downrange, right? So we have to push people down to far ends and move some of that stuff out of the way and just do basic qualification. It'll revamp that, move it back 75 feet so that we can use the small targets and qualify firearms instead of renting space in other facilities and from the state. You mentioned the dispatch center, the lobby, and the reception center. I'll show you that here shortly. And there will be a better training room and property room that we've already got it covered. This right here, when you take a look at it, I promise you this is just a concept. It's just a concept, but it was a real concept 3 years ago. It was what we budgeted for. It's what we were planning for, right? You're looking at the plan from 3 years ago. The contractors were already set in place. They created this. They designed it. It's where we got the money numbers from. And the couple things you wouldn't really notice, and I won't go into too much detail on it, but there's some Homeland Security things that just really need to be done. You know, law enforcement gets some threats sometimes, right? And we need things to prevent, and we're quite vulnerable in that building. And I had an assessment done when I first got here by the state of Ohio, and it was pretty thick. And it was a lot of things that needed to be fixed, and we're working on fixing those things, right? And this will fix that. There's a simple little things, again, I don't know if you can see it too well on your screen. It's small for me, but yours might be bigger. Where there's this seems small, but it's huge. And that's awnings that go over the vehicles. If you've ever seen first shift out really working hard in the winter, stuck out doing things, second shift comes in, and they're screaming for more bodies from second shift, and they're out there scraping ice off cars and snow. That's time, and time is sometimes can be life-threatening, right? So some of them I've seen them just don't have to waste the time, and they just jump in their personal car and head, right? So something as simple as an awning over their cars would fix a lot of that. So that's in this plan too. So there's the entryway. It's kind of special to us for a couple reasons. One, I think there's so much history that you have with your police department. It was built in 1972, this one, but the police have been around longer than that, right? And there's boxes and boxes of history stuff down there. I promised them I wouldn't make them wear the old uniforms I found, but I kind of have an affinity to them. They're old trooper uniforms. But anyway, joking. But there's a lot of stuff in there that's just going to waste. It's eroding, right? That's your history. That's your city's history. And so this will give us some space to give people when they come in to look at some of that stuff, kind of shift it around. But it'll also be dedicated to Terry McDowell, who we all know gave his life for this city. So on top of just having that, something to represent you in a very professional way, it also has functionality. So you can actually deal with clerks and not have to, and dispatchers if necessary, and a safe room that they can buzz the door to let somebody in case they're running from somebody. We don't always have officers on station, even though you think you run to the police station, that's where they're at, but they're out working, right? So they got to come back to their own police station. So I think I hit most of those. That's the general gist of what we're doing. With the crime rate, we're still focused on that. We haven't stopped working on that. We're going to stay no matter what happens. We will never give up on that. We will continue working hard. I have uniquely in a position where I can see what's going on around the entire Franklin County, and we are in better position than a lot of others, but it's all around us. And carjackings, as the mayor mentioned, juvenile crime, repeat offenders, they're just getting very emboldened, like they're almost not afraid of the law. So, but I can tell you this much, they are afraid of coming into Whitehall. So we're going to continue to keep that. Most of the time they run in and argue with you that they're not actually in Whitehall when they really are. So, and they also keep forgetting, and I'll finish here, that we tell them you commit the crime in Whitehall, you don't get to cross the line and say home base, because we're going to keep coming, right? And we're going to come all the way to Pittsburgh before, where we just got somebody in Bowling Green the other day who was down here trafficking in drugs. So we're going to continue doing those things. Those are things we're supposed to do. That isn't like, hoorah stuff. That is our duty to protect your life, your liberties, and your property. But we definitely need some resources to make this better moving forward. So with that said, I will open up to any questions that you have, and Deputy Chief Kelso has promised to answer all of them. Yes, sir.
No matter how many officers you put on the street, like the situation a couple of weeks ago where some youth stole a car, got caught, were taken to a detention facility, 4 of the 5 were let go and taken to a counseling center, if you will, let's call it what it is. That wasn't secured at all. They stole another car. How do you police officers deal with that? I mean, you're arresting people, they're underage, so they get turned back loose, or they stole another car and got caught by the Columbus police.
Well, I hear the frustration in your voice, right? And that frustration, Novice, I won't deny the fact that it's frustrating the police too. I can tell you that Whitehall has itself, along with our neighboring agencies over on the east side, have taken a lead role with working with these judges and prosecutors. They've been in I think we went almost a year and a half with a meeting right in Whitehall's roll call room, judges in the evenings and educators and advocates and stuff. What can we do to fix some of these problems? And it's not as easy as saying you just need to let them get locked up, which some of these it is just that easy. I don't understand it myself, but I will tell you that they have 79 beds. Those beds are reserved for felony 1s and felony 2s generally. They are always full. And in any given month, if I get 16, 20, 30 more, sometimes these guys by themselves can get you about 10, 12 of them in a month. And those are felonies, right? Those are serious misdemeanors at times. But and they're trying to figure out what do we do with someone who stole a car. In our mind, what you're supposed to do if somebody steals a car, right? In their mind is, yeah, but where do I put them? I don't really know where to put them, right? And you can put them in house arrest and all these other programs that they're trying to do. This is a community problem. This isn't just a court problem. It's not just a prosecutor problem. It's not just a police problem. It's just a community problem. We've got to figure it out as a community. And that's what we did in Whitehall. We worked with a lot of entities, both down in Columbus and locally, to build some kind of a collaboration we're still working on to do countywide, to say, what can we do about these juvenile issues? What can we do about repeat offenders? We just met a couple weeks ago with the administrative judge from the municipal court and worked with them to get them to agree to allow us to still do our blitzes that we do in the summer with all the agencies, right? If you recall, a couple times last year, every agency in Franklin County did one of those blitzes that the deputy chief mentioned. And we did it all at the same day, focused on the same serious issues, theft and warrants and drugs and things of that nature. So it can be frustrating to us, but I don't normally talk about that because that's not really the real issue. The real issue is frustrating to the victims, right? It's frustrating to the ones that it's happening to. It's for us, we'll just do it again. We're getting paid. But as I literally just told the media yesterday, when you steal something from somebody that's $240, not anybody, I don't know too many people making $240 an hour. So that means I've got to go back and work almost an entire day to earn enough money to buy it back again if I don't have insurance. And that means you've not only stole my property, but you stole 8 hours of my life from me. And it's bigger than just taking something. It's philosophically just wrong, but it's also, it's a failure to protect people's life, liberty, and property. And we recognize that. All the chiefs are talking loudly about it, and the judges are hearing us, and we're working on some processes, but there's just a lot of things that got put in place that you just can't snap your finger and make go away. And you say the scared straight? Well, I've personally never participated in that at all. But I will tell you what I think's happened to the scared straight is that school resource officer diversion program. And I think that replaced it. And the 76% success rate, if you go back and look at that, I think that was like the 90s, maybe 80s, 90s, early 2000s when they were doing that. And by the way, we do have parents that sometimes can you let us run our kids through your jail. So there's still a little bit of that. We're not afraid to do that. But we've got a better success rate percentage-wise with our diversion program. Those scared straight programs, from my memory, and I was a young officer when I first started hearing about them, but from my memory, was about those first-time offenders, those low-level, trying to scare them into not wanting to get into the system. It would never have worked with a hardened criminal. They were who was in there they were looking at.
We all know the kids today, the first thing they say when they see a gentleman who's a police officer or whatever, I'm a juvenile, you can't do nothing to me.
Well, in Whitehall, they say that with handcuffs on. Yes. Yes, we get it. I get what you're saying. I'm not even trying to make light of it. It's just they do know they come here. They have a higher probability of going somewhere, right? Now the courts decide whether we can lock them up or whether we put them in the place you were talking about, and they climb out the windows and those types of things. You know, let's not forget we're also talking about 11 and 12-year-old kids, right? If this was a 17, 18, 19-year-old, my empathy would be a little less. But they're 11 and they're 10, right, with guns. Somebody's missing it. It ain't the kid, right? And when we're pulling out of the vehicles, they're as tall as we are at 10, 11 years old. We don't know when we're chasing them around and pulling them out of the vehicle. We have no idea that they're 11. So we got guns out. And that's what bugs us. That's what keeps us up at night. If something happens and one of those kids don't know any better and they point a gun at an officer, and it's the middle of the night or whenever, and officers, I mean, they have a choice. They're trained to not die, right? So, and then now we've killed an 11-year-old. There's multiple things that start happening there. Community starts having problems. Everybody's upset. Probably no more upset than the officer who had to pull that trigger than maybe the family that lost a child. So I understand, I absolutely sympathize. I wish I had answers for you. But what I can say is, not to come full circle, but when they see officers in Whitehall, they just stay away. When they see us out moving around. When we got video of them breaking in the cars and stuff, they have a process where they break the window, sit back and wait, just to see if our unmarks are around. That's how we know, because we were, right? So, and then we catch them that way, right? So they are really, really good with these stealing cars quick, especially Kias and stuff. So yeah, so I think you had a question right here.
You put up the rates of different types of arrests by crime. Is narcotics within one of those categories?
Not the ones I have up here, not on my slides, but I can tell you that narcotics is a major, major part of that, right? Our narcotics guys, I don't know if you remember a few years ago, almost every press release they were putting out, they were making it, it was about a message. It wasn't about being sort of a bravado statement. It was a message. And that message was, if you steal in Whitehall, you deal drugs in Whitehall, we're going to come find you, right? And Sergeant Earl, Lieutenant Wilder, and Andy Smith, Sergeant Andy Smith, all of them have that same, they understand that. That's our mission, right, is to go out and get folks. But the reason it's not up there is because we seen a direct correlation between theft and all this other stuff, right, which included narcotics. And the reason I say that is because we know that most of the people using drugs are not going out and working 40 hours a week, using that check to buy their drugs. They're stealing people's stuff. So that's, I think, the reason narcotics was so successful and the reason that we were so successful in driving those to 20-year lows is because we focused on theft issues, which you probably appreciated because it was your stuff, right? So I think that's what kind of drove it, but narcotics absolutely is a major piece of that, because if you take narcotics and get it out, guess what leads with narcotics? Violent crime and guns, and then all of a sudden things like homicides and robberies and things start to come down, and we saw that.
I'm gonna have to stand up because my voice is a little low. But in regards to
Terry again.
in regards to the juvenile crime, this is a two-part question. Are most of those youth Whitehall youth?
I don't know the breakdown of the juveniles. First off, the answer to the question is most are not Whitehall, but I don't know the breakdown. I know that 72% of our overall crime is not from Whitehall.
Second part, you mentioned the collaborations with the, community members. Have we thought about maybe having citywide activity centers? I know, of course, we have a Y and kids can, go there and, have activities and various things. Maybe can we incorporate maybe some churches, some businesses where youth can come if they're bored, and have some types of structured activities? Because I'm thinking probably they're still in cars because they're idle, bored, no supervision, especially at, 10, 11, and 12.
Well, if you're to go to your last part and then forward, your last part is accurate. They say that when we ask them. We read the reports. Why'd you do it? It's fun, right? We're just having fun, right? It's dangerous fun, but it's fun. To your first point, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but we've been working with the juvenile court, and they do want to partner with the city of Whitehall. There's a big project we're trying to get in place. We're getting real close to wrapping it up. Hopefully I have it done here for the summer, and to do exactly what you said. Our Parks and Recreations Director, Shannon Sorrell, they've all jumped on board, just Megan and her staff, everybody, the whole city staff is saying, yeah, let's do this, right? We can be the testing grounds, to the point that I almost feel like with everybody else who's in the room, I'm stealing it all, right? Because we were hosting it, and then all of a sudden we're getting all the but they got to test it somewhere, right? And then they want to broaden it there to different communities, then work their way into Columbus. It's a very, very large group of folks from City of Columbus, City Schools, Dr. Dixon staff, and all of them have been at it. A lot of the municipal court judges and juvenile judges, a lot of faith leaders in the community, quite a few of them. We're not done with wrapping it up yet, but the answer to your question is yes. And the second part of that is Whitehall is where I'm going to get them to start. Yeah. Tracy?
With the juveniles, so like the ones that are under 18 and repeat offenders, have you talked to leaders and that about possibly start getting the parents involved by maybe charging the parents, or even like, I know like when kids first get their driver's license and they get a citation or whatever, the parents have to go to driving school or driving court, whatever, with those kids and go through a program. So why can't we do that with these juveniles that are stealing cars or stealing whatever? Start getting these parents involved and making them, have to suffer the consequences too of not making sure their children are doing what they're supposed to do.
So I don't want to feel like I'm answering all the questions, but the juvenile thing is something I've been working on for a year and a half, right? So, so if you guys have something, jump right in there, but because I think I'm getting paid back for saying he's going to answer them all. But let me sometimes we say that too, right? So we'll say, why can't we do something? Why can't the parents be held responsible for this? I'm reading a report the other day, and there's 3 kids, and we interviewed all 3 mothers. And I can tell you what the mothers are saying. Why are you letting them out? Why do you keep letting them out? I'm trying to control them. I can't. I'm working. I'm not at home. You bring them back. The courts put them back into the house. They break out the window, and they continue to do it. I wasn't even there. I'm not so sure that if we start charging the parents, that's going to do anything but just exasperate the problem. Some of them, and especially like 2 of those 3 for sure, who are frustrated with the courts as we are, If you see some of the moms, which a lot of them are raised by their moms or their grandmothers, if you see some of their moms, the kids are 100 pounds bigger than they are, right? And so they're just struggling, right? Struggling with work, struggling, working 2 jobs. That's not always the case. And there are chances, depending on circumstances, that, depending on what's going on, not necessarily these exact examples, but where parents, if they are involved in something and causing something, they can be charged with stuff and have been charged with things in the past, child endangering and things of that nature, if they're complicit to a degree, right? So there's things that we can do, but it seems like that's a good knee-jerk, let's do it, and I'm not saying it's wrong because I've said it myself, right? So let's charge some of these parents with this, right? But the reality of it is, when I recognize what we're dealing with, I know that's not going to do anything but make things worse. But we do need to fix something, and I don't know what it is. I wish I did.
I have an opinion what the pastor and his wife are doing is the basis for everything.
I agree with you.
And it's, until that happens again, these single parents, or probably most part single parents, can't control their kids. How many times did we sneak out of the house and do stuff? Maybe we didn't steal cars, but our parents didn't know what we were doing. So they kind of take it out of the equation.
She just said you did.
But talking about crime in general, I know somebody, I'm close to somebody who was burned out of a house because of something that had happened, and they're very fearful of even calling the police about something. What protects somebody if they should call you on a tip or they see something? Because there have been cases where drug dealers have hired lawyers to use the Freedom of Information Act to find out who was going to witness against them and have them rubbed out. I mean, we saw that happen on Broad Street here. Somebody was killed who was supposed to be a witness in a trial.
So I can give you an answer, but I got to finally let one of my detectives, my detective bureau here, speak, and maybe he can talk to you a little bit about proffering and some of the stuff we do generally. I don't know if that would help answer. Do you want to give them the answer on what we do with our witnesses?
As far as tips, we have a number of different ways that people can report a tip and still remain anonymous. And in some cases, they can give us the information and we won't know who they are. They don't have to provide their name, their address, or anything. They can cooperate as to the level that they feel comfortable with. We'll work with whatever information is given to us to the best of our ability. Yes.
Yes. There's there's probably no real perfect answer to that, to be honest, but generally we have doing it anonymously is usually the key. We have confidential informants we use. Sometimes.
I'll add this, and this kind of goes back to even the businesses. When you're a business and you're the victim of a theft, the likelihood that you may receive a subpoena. The likelihood that you're actually going to have to go to court is like winning the lottery at this point, to be honest with you. I've been a police officer for 30 years. You can probably count the number of times that I've actually had to go to court, on my 2 hands. And that, during the time, 100 arrests a year, and still, over a 30-year career, 10 times I've had to actually go to court and testify. So the majority of these, I would say probably 95%, are proffered out. They come to a plea agreement. They plead to a lesser offense or something. The Franklin County is so overwhelmed with the number of cases that they're dealing with that very few of them actually go before a judge. They are negotiated behind the scenes between the attorneys, and they come to an agreement, and they walk in, and in 2 minutes they present what they've agreed to the judge. He accepts it, and they move on. So the likelihood that anybody's actually going to have to go, unless it's a very serious case like a homicide or something like this, the likelihood that they're actually going to have to go to court and present, to testify in front of people is very slim.
Is there anything you can do in the school system at a younger age to prevent them, 11?
Life-wise, obviously, I'm going to say it again. I think that's a great. Our school resource officers do a lot of stuff with the youth. We do events. Our Parks and Recs does amazing stuff in the summer, and we participate both from a security and a participation process, as well as our National Night Out. We do stuff like that. That gives us a chance to interact with the community. officers on bike patrol, and all those other things we do. But I would remind you as we begin to go down that road that they're not on the road now as they're doing those things. So we're sort of limited on how much of that we can do because of the number of officers. But that does seem to be something that comes up, Terry. That's a great question. Really, I go back to what I said before, is let us partner with the community and help. The community should be helping do this, right? Working with the youth. But I think there was one right back here, had a question. Go ahead, right up front then.
So in the fire department, there's the SAFE program.
Safe stations? Yes. Mm-hmm.
They're a resource for people in recovery or having an addiction issue or something. Does the police department also work with that at all? Is that part of your diversion program?
We don't work with that, but we have agreed with that. So when that program got put in place, you want people to feel comfortable going. That's a tremendous program the fire departments had, I think, nationwide success with. I think, as a matter of fact, they were in Congress, weren't they, talking about it? So amazing stuff that they did. Our part in it was minimal. We promised not to arrest them and sneak and do a narcotics operation at the doorway, right? So, because we want them to be helped too, right? It's a supply and demand kind of thing. We have, I'm trying to remember the name of it. It's Operations Harm something. What is it we're doing at school? You remember? I can't remember. It'll come in my head in a minute, but I'll tell you what it is though, right? And it'll probably get them in my head. We agree with the school board and the superintendent that whenever we have issues going on with the kids in their lives or something like that, that we know about it, but we're not going to tell the school about it or to spread the gossip, so to speak, right? But it's very sensitive, and we think the school should be aware of it, that we notify them a certain way. We just recently started this, but we'll notify them a certain way, and then they're aware that the child's been through some type of a traumatic event. And rather than want to kick the kid out of school or send them to the principal office or something like that because they're acting out today, they usually now know why, and they get social workers and stuff involved and work closely with them in that way. But
Like if there's been a domestic dispute at the house or something?
Domestic and overdose, which is our biggest part. If there's an overdose, I don't know why in the world that's not in my head. I've been working on it for a year, but it'll come to me. But those are the things that we do from our side. The best thing that we can do, because we're kind of limited. If we find you with drugs and stuff, we sort of have things we have to do, right? But there are some things that we can do, and overdoses, we do two things. We're dealing with those who are supplying it. That's who we are. Then there's advocate programs. There's places that help people get off of the addiction programs. And then there's the safe stations that can kind of fast track people into that system. It's been very successful. So police, we can do some of those things, and we try to do some of those things, but really our main primary role is really protecting people's life, liberty, and property. I keep saying that, right? It's our number one role, is to stop the stuff and prevent it from happening. And then the other stuff we try to dabble in as best as we can. We try to be a jack of all trades, but that's not necessarily our skill sets. Why don't you add one back here?
Yes, Deputy Kelso,
Yes, ma'am.
since this is your baby, I go here 5 days a week down South Deering Road at 5:30 in the morning. I am passed every morning when I'm going 25 mile an hour by these wonderful people going 35 and 40. And when they get close to you, there's police station, they don't even stop, they don't come down. I've often wondered if we should write the tag number down and notify you.
You know what, you can. With traffic offenses, it's a little bit different than criminal offenses where, say, you witnessed a crime and you call and now I can use you as a witness. Traffic offenses, other than OVI,
Right.
I gotta have really eyes on by a police officer, but that doesn't mean we can't look into it, run the tag, figure out where they live, and watch. So,
I mean, it's
yes,
some of the same people every
Right.
morning.
yeah.
And my remark to them is always, they can't hear me naturally. I don't want to jail, I don't want to be one of your residents. But my remark to them is, why don't you get out of bed early?
Right.
I said, you don't have to go this way.
And everybody's in a rush and they're playing on their phone while they're in a rush, so it's even worse.
And some
But
of them do go like, I mean, they look like they're either half asleep or they just coming from the bar or something. It scares me as a person going down the road.
well, for sure, I can notify third shift who will still be on at that hour to keep an eye on Yearland Road. It's something that you're seeing all the time.
Foremost, sir,
Absolutely.
all three of you, I want to thank you for the job you do here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Upon you a couple of times, I had one of the nicest officers who helped me in this situation. Thank you, really, thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
And I will pass that on to third shift to make sure they know about, keep an eye on it, see if we can grab someone.
I just don't want anybody getting hurt.
No, neither do we.
Wait,
Now, isn't it a law that you're not supposed to pass?
you cannot pass on Yearland Road like that. That's correct.
And you are supposed to use courtesy rules, right?
Well, in theory, they're still there, yes, that's right.
I mean, did they stop when you're on the cars?
I believe so.
New Teslas. Yes, sir.
Regarding the new facility, you're gonna have an actual live firing range, not one of those electronic.
Yeah, so it'll, the firing range we have right now is live fire. All we're gonna do is extend it longer so we can do all of our weapon systems, as well as make it safe with real steel instead of blocks, which aren't real safe if you've shot a firearm.
And what is this gonna cost the average taxpayer again?
I had that number here, it's like
So the average homeowner at $100,000 value would be 27 cents a day.
Okay, now I
Anybody
have
with
a
this
question for you.
senior exemption would be 20 cents a day.
27 cents a day.
Yeah, unless you're a senior will cost 20 cents.
Can you restate your question? I'm sorry.
Does that include the senior citizen?
Okay,
That's
yeah,
20 cents a
overall.
day is what the mayor said.
Yeah, the senior citizen, it'll be 20 cents a day.
Okay, I was checking because someone told me a different amount. I said, I'm going to this meeting, I'll find out for you so you get it right.
Great.
But thank you very much.
On the budget, the 2022 budget from the city states that there will be an increase of nearly 530,000 from 21 to 22, and with the reason being to bring the police force to 60 full-time officers and 25 auxiliary officers, which is the same thing as being covered in the levy. Can you explain why it was in the budget and now there's a levy?
Yeah, our budgets, I believe almost all of my budget things I've wrote, the goal has always been to get to 60 each year. It's always been 60 since 2017. We were at 48, and then we had a budget to get us to 52, then 53, then 54, then 55. Some years that fell back, but that's always been our budget to get to 60. Our authorized strength in the budget was 54. Might be 56 for this year. 56 for this year.
For 2022?
hmm
So 2 extra salaries would be placed back in the budget as discretionary funds?
Not necessarily, only because we don't know yet how much we're gonna have to be spending on income tax refunds. Maybe I should
Yes.
come up to
And some of that's grant funded too. I could explain that too when she's done. Those are funded grants.
Yeah, grants are different than general fund. Regarding, we have never really been able to get up to 60 police officers in every budget that he has submitted. We've never really been able to do that. However, unfortunately, we always seem to spend every bit of what we've allocated for police salaries because of the overtime that we have to do in order to make sure that we still provide the services to our citizens. Now, in the budget this year, in the past, we've generally allocated about $1.5 million for income tax refunds for expenses. This year, we had to allocate $4 million because of what the pandemic has done to, cause the work at home issue. So now we have to give back $2.5 million extra a year that we had never counted on before. I would like to say that in 2020, we were ready. We were ready to expand that police department. We were going to go ahead and take that on ourselves. Not so much maybe the police extra at that time, but definitely the expansion. And then when the pandemic hit, we had to put the kibosh on everything. We put the kibosh on our street programs. And then we have to now, or we're catching up on that. We had to put the kibosh on hiring. We even had to lay off because we didn't know what was happening with COVID. So that was one of the reasons why we're coming with this at this point, is because with the amount of money we have to spend in income tax refunds, we cannot support everything on our own. The city will still be paying approximately $675,000 to $750,000 a year to support the police department. However, we can't support the whole thing for issue 10. I hope I was able to answer that question. Okay. Is there any other budget questions maybe?
In the pamphlet here, it says that percent of levy revenue dedicated to police operations and capital expenses. The levy's gonna cover 100% of that. What exactly is capital expenses?
Oh, capital expenses would be like building and things like that. I mean, that's what capital is. Now, is it gonna cover 100% of manpower? No. Is it gonna cover 100% of extra automobiles that we will probably need to purchase? No. So it won't cover, the benefits that we have to pay, payroll, and other things that go into that. But it will cover the actual police building. Yes?
So with it being a permanent levy,
Mhm.
salary could, be looked at as a permanent
Mhm.
cost.
Yes.
whereas Capital expenditures are not. There's a one-time investment in the building, and then it just becomes maintenance and saving for the next building. So can you-
I would say that there's never a one-time cost for any building, just like
Well,
in.
a one-time major investment to build the building.
Yes,
right?
yes. But, between, 15 to 20 years later, you're always going to have to put back in HVAC. You're going to have to upgrade technology continually. 30 years ago, we didn't even have technology. We didn't even know what that was. I mean, this will be a permanent levy in order to help us continually try to maintain that building, as well as maintain salaries and support salaries as we go forward. Any other question? Oh, Terry.
I've talked to a couple people about this, and they're having issues with how much it's gonna cost them more a month because they're on a fixed income
Mm-hmm.
and or unemployment or disability, and that scares me a little bit, that group of people who are not gonna vote for it. That scares me.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I would like to say that I certainly understand their dilemma. I mean, especially for those people who are on fixed incomes. It's very difficult. So I totally understand that. But also, I think we have to be concerned about the safety. How important is safety to everyone? And I think it's just as important to people who live on fixed incomes as it is for anybody else. And if we can, make Whitehall safer, it may help everyone be able to live on their salaries more efficiently and effectively. Is there any other budget questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
She saved me. I'm a numbers guy. I would like one last piece on I just want to hit the grant real quick, and then we'll come right over here. I want to remind folks we've asked for a significant amount of grants. There's been a grant for officers, I think, every year I've been here, but maybe before that even, I'm not sure. But and the way the grants work is you have to fund a third of that up the first year yourself. So when you look at that budget with a couple people, we've got grants for them. That's still the last grant. And we have to fund part of that. We don't have to fund their entire salaries. To get all the way to 60, we have a grant that's approved that. I think some of you heard Senator Brown talk about that. In order to do that, in order to afford it, we're going to have to, if we get to 60, we could do it. But then in 3 years, you'd have to lay them off, which the feds would never allow us to do. So we have to demonstrate to them that we can afford this. But if we did, and we didn't have the funding for it, we'd have to lay them off at the third year, even if we could afford 2/3, which is what it would be at the third year. So we pay a third the first year. The second year, we have to cover half of it, and then 75% on the third year, and then 100% of their salary and benefits on the fourth year for grants. You had, I hope that covered some of that, but.
During some of these major active shooter events, and the question's gonna get back to our dispatchers. During some of these events, there was so much radio traffic that the systems actually shut down and they couldn't hear every communication that the officers were talking. This new dispatch center, is that part of the plan, is to have this new technology that would handle?
So if you're familiar with what Gahanna did, they put in this whole new CAD system here recently, a new radio system, the MEC, which is the medical side of it, a whole new facility, a whole new upgrades and stuff. We looked at the exact same system that they had, and we're looking what we ended up getting budgeted back when we were first going to be able to do this in 2018-19. We asked for the system that they had plus, right? We want what they have. This had to be a 30-year plan. So if you just kind of go in with a 30-year plan with what you can just barely afford, you really only had a 5-year plan. So we asked for what can we have that will sustain us for a good 30 years, right? Not the 100 years, but 30 years, right? We're putting bad Band-Aids on it, but 30 years, what system can we grow into? And that's what we're looking at. So the system that we're going to have, both radio technology as well as the CAD system itself, that allows us to communicate both digitally and communicate audibly, is state of the art. It's the best that's out there. And we want to make sure that's what we get. So to make it even for sure, because we want this to work and we want to have the best that we can get, right? So we're also asking for technology grants too, to make sure that we have the best and even the additional things that would be better that you want to have that would just make us more efficient. All right, so we have the best that we can get, and then whatever packages they want to bring in annually to make sure that we stay up to speed, like everything Columbus is using, anything the State Patrol is using, we want that here so that we're dispatching, and 1 second, it could result in a death, right? If you just 1 second of time or a missed communication. So I don't know if that answered it fully for you, but I'm not the technology geek, right? But I can tell you that we definitely said, all those things that everybody else can do to keep their community safe and their officers safe, we want that. And then that's what they gave us in the budget.
And that budget would include any CAD system. You gotta have somebody who's gonna keep it up and running.
Yeah, our IT folks, and our IT folks are really good at but everybody does what's in their wheelhouse, what you're good at. And if they were standing here, because he said it to me numerous times, we will do what we're expert at, and Motorola will do what they're expert at, right? So Motorola runs these things, they create these things. So we have the staff that keeps the little things fixed, can get it back up if something goes down. And then Motorola's on call as part of the contract to fix the things, sometimes remotely, sometimes they have to come.
Communication, like if there's something going on in Whitehall that I can know about it so that I don't go there if something's going on, like, or is there anything that goes out to the citizens that says, hey, this is what you could do to help? Because I know we already do what we can do to help, but additional things to help prevent the crime.
So there's two people in this room that are experts at that. PIO.
Well, I mean, yeah, but we run social media. Do you get on our Facebook or
I
our
do,
Twitter?
yeah.
That's where you'll find those. I got a guy running it right now, Sergeant John Earl, and he does a really good job. In fact, I called him and he was putting one out as I was on the way here. We went all the way to.
Does he does it as it's happening, or is that after?
If it's necessary that it's happening, right?
Okay.
Like if we're just doing some operation, it's not gonna affect your world. If I put that on there, suddenly I get people that just wanna come gawk. That's now gonna be a problem, right? But if it's something where there's a problem, I need you to stay away, then that's gonna be on there. And you'll see, we probably need to get better at it here and there, but we were really good for a while on Twitter at least, of saying road closures, like, hey, there's an accident over here, try to avoid this area. Sometimes that stuff happens at night, and of course, nobody's working that has to log in to do that, and I just can't give that to anybody. I'll get some stupid tweet on there that violates some kind of law, right? So we try to segment to that 20 people that can do that. So, but that's where you'll find it, is our Twitter and especially our Facebook. He's really good at the Facebook stuff, even better than Twitter.
You've probably received an alert or two in the past that our radios have gone down or our telephone lines are down. And, providing you a number to call. Those are examples of when our system actually has gone down in the past. I'm not making this stuff up. It really does go down.
Yeah, I know.
If this levy passes, how do y'all go about selecting new officers and, how long does it take to hire them?
Well, if the levy passes, we're already moving forward because we're always trying to hire, right? So we're trying to stay ahead of that game already. It takes us, what do you want to say, about 90 days or so to get someone clearly through a process. He manages that, so.
Yeah. And we're constantly, as the chief says, we do it through those lateral transfers. That's open on our website. Police officers can apply there. We do it through our NTN test, which is our civil service test. I actually contacted HR today and asked for a new list. And they'll go in there, they'll go and grab me a new list like every 6 months. And we're constantly putting them through, because we are in that stage where we have retirements or people going to other police departments or moving to different, so we're always hiring right now. So yeah, it's a constant.
Yeah, there's even times that we'll have 4 or 5 people sort of in the process and we don't have a job for them yet. We're just sort of going through. We expect someone's going to leave, or there's retirement, or new budgets are coming out. We can hire someone extra. Because it just takes so long. And if you get 5 or 6 people, sometimes all 5 or 6 fell. And we start all over, 5 or 6 more people. That happens way more often than you can imagine. Yeah.
What is going to happen, please know, if it fails?
Well, that is actually a good question, Terry. I got your scanner up here too, by the way. She's all happy now. That is a good question. What is it going to happen? First and foremost, I've said routinely every time, from the time we started this is your community, you meaning everybody in Whitehall. We provided what we think is necessary to give you the best practice and advice. If the community was to vote it down, which I hope that they wouldn't, but if they were, then we'll respect that. We'll do what we can. We'll move and we'll do what we have to do. I mean, there's nothing else I can say about that, right? Is that that doesn't mean we're not going to still work hard, right? We're just going to be stuck with all those same problems we just mentioned.
Can you put another issue for November if this one fails? Can you design another one for November?
That's not my world, but I am a taxpayer and a voter. I don't know how popular that would be, but I don't know. That's not in my world. I don't know.
I cannot comment on what council would do, all right? And I cannot comment on, things, I can only comment on why I feel like people should vote for this. If that happens, we will somehow make sure that we're still providing the best service as we can. Although I do think it could be better if the levy was passed.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Was this initially proposed by council?
yes, well, actually, it was a collaboration between administration and city council. And so was brought to city council, they had to vote on it to put it on the ballot.
I'll take one more and then we'll, Dr. Greg? Sorry. Sometimes you can throw your boss out there once in a while. Anybody with anything else? Well, with that said, thanks everyone. Pastor, you and your wife, your family, your whole crew back here that's always helping us. They're tremendous, do great work. You always support us, and I can't thank you enough for that. And I am seriously looking forward to your LifeWise graduation. All right.